and 15 fashion consultancies, digital transformation consultancies, and circular consultancies. And we asked them simple questions around the areas such as, what's the percentage of your material collection that is done with 3D? How are you digitizing your materials? How many materials have you digitized today? What is stopping you or your company from adopting a more widespread digital workflow? And overwhelmingly, these are the responses that we got from our community. To start off, the current method of digitization is way too time consuming. It's a linear workflow, therefore it's very, very difficult to scale. It's limited by the hardware, no matter what you buy. It has a limited capacity. Skill set is difficult to learn and more difficult to transfer. The process is confined by location because very oftentimes the logistics of getting hangers and sending those hangers to a scanning lab is costly and time consuming. And even sometimes packages are not even able to reach its destination due to many reasons, possibly around customs, around COVID. And not to mention the least, it's very difficult to deploy a process into a supply chain that relies heavily on hardware and those difficult skill sets to acquire. So with that said, we have distilled a lot of the considerations around material digitization into 3 areas for all you listeners to think about. Number 1, the logistics of getting hangers and sending them to scanning lab. Is it worth it? Is it really worth doing that? And then we want to open you up to the idea of digitization at source, and then we will tell you more about it in a second. And lastly, third-party digital asset marketplace. Is it an option or is it only a temporary fix? Excuse me. 90% of our users tell us that the logistics of getting hangers and sending that to a lab is way too time consuming and costly. And even if you are able to get complete fabric information from your partners, very often it takes very long. Oftentimes the information is either incomplete or is partial due to its secondhand info. So sending swatches and hangers has always been a bottleneck in that process. In the last 6 months, a lot of our users try to ship materials to different regions, and sometimes those packages simply don't even arrive on destination for many reasons. Sometimes it has to do with customs, sometimes it has to do with just an overall supply chain disruption. So let's take a deeper look into the path of material digitization. On the left-hand side, you see a lot of fabric mills and manufacturers. Historically and conventionally, these mills FedEx their physical products to the brands. And then the most common digital production process is that instead of sending to the brands, you send it to a regional scanning center. I mean, luckily for some of the brands and retailers, they have that set up in-house, so you send it to them. But then again, it's always a process that's bottlenecked by location and hardware. So what we promote in Frontier is that let's move that operation in-house. As long as you have access to the internet or a standard office scanner, we can use our AI technology to transform those 2D images directly into 3D ready materials. This process is more scalable, and then the ownership it has a higher ownership of data, and then ultimately more easily can be deployed into your production partners. Lastly, let's talk about the pros and cons of a third-party marketplace. Just last week, the CEO of a US PLM system asked me, why not just go to a third-party marketplace to get those digital assets? Why not just outsource that? Let's talk about outsourcing material digitization. The biggest problem is that you always end up at the same place. That process is, again, confined by the hardware, by limited capacity, by you have to ship goods back and forth into that lab to get started. So you always end up at the same place. So let's talk about using a third-party marketplace. The biggest issue with third-party is that even if you find those digital assets, you still don't have that direct connection to the fabric mill who can ultimately deliver or manufacture that fabric that you requested. And then secondly, if you cannot integrate that operation, that workflow, that work stream into your existing perhaps PIM system or ERP system, that process is always going to be outside of the operation. You cannot integrate it into, you cannot consistently get quality digital assets from the partners that ultimately you're going to be sourcing from. So to wrap it up, I'm going to do a very quick recap. You really want to reconsider, is for anybody who wants to get into TPC or who has been doing this for a number of years, you really want to reconsider if the logistics of getting hangers and sending those to lab is a viable solution. And then secondly, you really want to reconsider digitizing at source. This can potentially open up a lot of possibilities. And lastly, third-party marketplace for digital assets is just not a permanent fix. It's only a temporary one. So with that said, let's take a deeper look into our frontier approach. So as I mentioned, as long as you have access to the internet or a scanner, you can take that physical swatch or hanger, scan it, and with that 2D scan file, we're able to transform it into a 3D ready material with fabric spec, metadata, and ultimately you can plug that into your design software such as Browser or 𝐸𝐤, or you can, with OpenAPI, connect our data points into your PIM system, into your bill of material, into your digital asset management DAM, and even your ERP. So let's define what we mean by 3D ready material. A 3D ready material should include the standard fabric specs, which is quite common. And then you should have two types of metadata. One type is about the 3D texture maps. The other kind are the physical properties, such as stretch, bend, thickness, which these values need to be plugged into a 3D simulation in order for your design software to simulate a prototype. We want to promote another aspect that we recently added to our, is the fourth dimension of data. It's around sustainability impact measurements, which I'll talk a little bit more in a little bit. So how does it really work? How can someone digitize material just by scanning it and then with the snap of your finger be able to get those digital assets so quickly? So this is what we did at Frontier. We fed into a GAN network, a generative adversarial network. That's an AI algorithm, 3D texture maps, and 3D and 2D images of textiles to train a hybrid model that can reconstruct normal map, roughness, displacement, and base from just one single textile scanned image, provided that you scan properly. And then the fundamental of a GAN network is that the concept is that, again, will generate quality output that can pass the scrutiny of a trained expert. And this process, it gets increases quality, it reinforces itself over time. So now we move on to the second mostly asked questions. How do we get those physical properties from the fabrics? So it's not magic. We collected actual test results from ISO, AATCC, ASTM, from the 𝐸𝐤 fabric kit, from the Browser fabric kit. With that data, we plot them across different dimensions and then build a regression model where we were able to find correlation between different fabric types. So as long as you provide attributes such as fabric type, yarn composition, weight, density, these type of material attributes, we can output information such as values, such as stretch, bend, thickness, shear, and friction, all the ones that you're gonna need in a 3D simulator. So this is this is a snapshot of our user interface in our material library. Because we're super focused on materials, that's why you can see the fabric details. You can directly output those into a U3M file, and then we have GLTF file on the way coming up in a few weeks. And then you can input directly from your PLM or Excel or whatever existing system that you use in-house, and directly plug those commercial information into your digital material library. We have a browser-based 3D viewer, just allow most of the users who don't currently have 3D software to have a quick view on what that material looks like under a 3D simulator on different prototypes. The majority of our user community, I would say over 85%, use either browser or 𝐸 to conduct their digital design. And that's why this is a heavily requested plugin basically allows user to drag their digital assets from the Frontier bank and directly put inside different design environments, such as what I'm showing here. You can select the materials, import it into vStitcher, drag and drop onto your patterns, and there you go. Here you go. That's the result you get. So let me share some of the testimonial from some of the brands that we've been working very, very closely with. They said, we've been talking about DPC for years, and now we're finally making a significant progress because we're in control of that process. Inside the material development process, there's a lot of proprietary data. Most of the brands and retailers, they treasure that type of data set. So they want to be able to own that process. And another user said, it's so amazing that multiple offices can upload and co-work at the same time, instead of all the work piling up into one location, and ultimately the output is super limited. Another user recently told me, we now have a much larger pipeline of digital materials. So it's finally possible to integrate DPC into a wider brand, into more brands inside of our organization. Next, let's talk about decarbonization and how we can turn this as seemingly a buzzword into actionable terms. 𝐸𝐸𝐺 is an avid user of Frontier. They've been using Frontier for some time, and to date, they have 2,000 plus digital materials on the platform, and that's a joint effort from 4 different offices across the globe. And every material 𝐸𝐸𝐺 provide to their brand clients, they're able to show the environmental impact measurements on every material. How are they able to do that? It's through a partnership with Made2Flow and Frontier. With this partnership, we're able to output on per meter basis the greenhouse gas emission, water consumption, and land use on every material, provided that you give us attributes such as fabric type, composition, yarn size, density, and weight. If you give us these kind of values, in 3 to 5 minutes, you will be able to show that to your clients. Design Hub is another module of ours where it takes designers from early stages of material concept all the way through multi-sourcing. Think of it a digital environment where it mimics the physical sourcing process, where a brand can share their design brief or design direction or guideline to any number of stakeholders by invite via email. You can join this digital workspace, and then where different stakeholders, in typical cases that fabric mills, when you get this request, just go ahead and submit the relevant digital assets, digital materials that can fit the criteria. So we're quickly wrapping up today now to what is next. So what is Frontier going to be working on going forward? As you know, as we're in this industry, we all know that fashion, textile, and footwear industry combined is the 3rd largest polluter of CO2 in the world. 2 out of every 3 garments will end up in a landfill. Only 1 gets sold. So we really want to contribute to a more sustainable operation process for the whole industry. And what it all comes down to is that we really just need to make what consumers really need. So in order to get there, we believe the main drivers is that 1, there's gonna be a sufficient or a seamless enough digital workflow that can connect the dots in order to make this happen. Secondly, we need to fill the technology gap between development and manufacturing, where it allows us to shift toward a world of an on-demand manufacturing process. So ultimately, we make based on what end consumers really need. So with that said, this is the end of the formal part of my presentation. I hope the content has been helpful. We want to open up the rest of the session to lots of discussion and QA. So please type in your questions in the chat box, and then our team will read out your questions, and I'll do what I can to share my thoughts on those. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Wayne, for your amazing presentation. So now let's move on with our Q&A session. So we're gonna start by answering some of your questions, and you can still ask us questions while we are answering the first one. Okay, let's start with the first question, and it's from Gabriel. How do you account for drape when scanning without testing the fabric?
Sorry, could you repeat that question again?
Okay,
I'm getting a lot of noise.
Okay,
you mentioned something.
Yes, is how do you account for drape when scanning without testing the fabric?
Okay, so I believe that question is around drape, but do correct me wrong if I'm not getting that question correctly. So let me go back to that slide where I was showing. So when we were talking about inside a design environment, in any simulator, there are always physical properties that powers a simulator. And typically those values include stretch, bend, thickness, shear, and friction. So the way our technology works is that by providing different attributes such as fabric type, yarn composition, density, GSM, if you provide us these kind of data points, we will be able to output these values. So you can directly plug into your browseware or 𝐸𝐤 design software. Then in their engine, you can get the final simulated output. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. And we have the second question from Albert. And how do you manage your digital assets if your suppliers are using digital 3D tools?
Sorry, you're gonna have to say that again. I only heard Albert.
Okay, how to manage your digital assets if your suppliers are using different 3D tools?
Different type of technology. Okay, so this question we get asked almost all the time, because as a supplier, you have to get into their mindset is that most businesses want to invest in a technology that can be a fit across the board. However, the ecosystem, in terms of fashion technology, we're just not there yet. So the core value of Frontier is that we want to provide you high interoperability, meaning with one scanned image, we're able to output different file types that can work across the board. Currently, we have browseware and 𝐸𝐤, but then moving forward, our user community has actually requested different solutions that perhaps better for footwear, perhaps for other design purposes. We have those in the pipeline. If you have an urgent need, I encourage you to get in touch with us, describe your need, and then perhaps we can be compatible with that solution, so we can plan ahead and then be compatible with that solution that you're currently using further down the road.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. And we have another question, and it's how exactly do you output the environmental impact?
Could you say your question again, please?
How exactly do you output your environmental impact?
Okay, so we're a user-generated content platform, and over the course of actually a very short time, we collected tons of material image, graphical image, material data, material metadata, especially a lot of data around processing, how a material is produced. So with this type of metadata and data set, we fed it to we passed it over to our partner who used an LCM methodology to ultimately calculate the environmental impact in couple metrics, such as greenhouse gas, water consumption, and land use. And basically that describes how our partnership works. We automated the data collection, streamline the calculation of that process, and then ultimately just present you with very, very simple estimates on the Frontier platform. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. What software are you using for generating AI texture maps after scanning fabrics in a flatbed scanner?
What software are we using
for AI texture? For AI textures maps after scanning the fabrics in a flatbed scanner.
Okay, so if I didn't make the point clear, I'm going to try to drive it home right now. The core Frontier AI technology is that we have trained many, many models, and we use a hybrid of those models for different fabric types. So if you gave us a woven 2D scan image or a knit scan image, we're able to quickly, with our built out algorithm, can output different texture maps, such as normal, displacement, roughness, and base. So that's what we do. We don't use a different software. That's the core focus of Frontier.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And there's another question. What's the necessary input to calculate the environmental impact?
Okay, so like I mentioned, fabric type is important. The weight of your fabric is important in GSM, or in other units, we can convert it. Yarn composition is important. Density, also important. The way you finish could affect the bend. So overall, these are the minimal attributes that you should provide. But then, of course, the more information that you're able to provide us, the more accurate the outcome.
Okay, we have another question, and it's the following. What do you think is the most critical barrier that brands are facing, and what is the best solution to solve the digitization journey?
I'm not sure if I understand that question, but I'm going to try to repeat it back. What is the most critical issue?
Yeah, the critical issues that brands are facing for entering the digital world.
I would say all three that I mentioned during the session. Number one, I mean, repeatedly, our users come to us because it's just not viable. Getting the hangers, getting the swatches, sending over to a lab, to a scanning center, and then wait 2 weeks to get the result. Many of our users, they've been on this journey for quite some time, and then their output is very, very limited. 10, 20, 50 digital materials. And with that amount, you just can't run an in-house workflow of digital prototyping with this amount of digital asset. So that, again, is number one, which is why we're promoting digitization at source. You very quickly be able to gain access to a lot more materials that your partners are currently already providing you with. So I would say these are the big areas, but then of course, every brand and retailer face different issues. Sometimes it's a mindset issue, but then if we feel like in this space, there are many more SaaS solutions coming out, and solutions are no longer siloed. They're more interoperable than 2 years ago, and the cost to entry has lowered significantly. So in this day and age, I think there's really nothing to stop you except yourself. So go ahead and get started. Try out something.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And there's another question from Jolenta. Where is the price for generating one fabric for clothes?
What's the price for generating one fabric for clothes?
Yes.
I can't say I have a number on generating one material. The way, if you, I encourage you to do a search, general search on the marketplace. I'm sure you can find some services out there that they scan by per piece of material. And the way Frontier works is that we're a SaaS model. Think of it as like a Google Drive. The amount of digital material that's stored in the cloud, we charge that. And then amount of materials that you need to convert or transform into a 3D ready material, that's another feature module that we charge. We charge on monthly basis and then ultimately annual basis.
Okay, thank you. And there's another question.
Go ahead.
A long one.
Go ahead.
How to
and actually,
convince...
I just want to add
Yes.
to that last question.
Yeah, sure.
If you want more details in terms of pricing, we're actually happy to provide you offline, or try to contact us after the session, and we'll try to share more details in terms of what is the cost to enter this space. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is. Okay, here we go with the next question. How to convince the suppliers in different places to adopt the new workflows? If different buyers require different types of digital materials, and it is hard to build a standard to implement for long.
Let me try to understand that question. I think there are two parts. One is how do you convince a supplier to do XYZ? The short answer is it's very hard to do that unless it's very easy to entry, unless this is a workflow that can integrate into their existing process. So it's typically difficult to try to change the direction of your partners unless you have a very friendly solution that almost everybody can easily get on board. So that's one. And the second question I think you're referring to is compatibility, or what was the second part of that question?
The second part, let me read it for you again.
Yeah.
Different buyers require different types of digital materials, and it's hard to build a standard to implement it for a long time.
Okay,
the way problem.
Sure. The way I see it is that despite there are different standards out there, typically they're actually quite similar. So as I mentioned, 90% of our user base either use browseware or cloud. And then our output files are compatible with both of them. So if you have questions, if you have more questions regarding that issue, or your client or customer uses something different other than that, we're happy to help you out, help you kind of address that issue, perhaps after this session. Do contact us directly, and then our team will try to solve that to the best we can.
Okay. Thank you so much. And please, if you have any other questions, you can ask us now. Okay, here's another one from Jolanta again. And she says, many 3D designers would like to get 3D options from the mills producing physical materials as their digital twins. So I think the direction should be to make 3D twins for every physical material.
Let me try to internalize that. So 3D designers would like to get 3D options from the mills. Exactly, producing physical materials, that's exactly what we do. So if we can help you more, please do get in touch with us, and then let's see what we can do. Our core focus is to take a physical material, turn it into a 3D ready one, and sometimes if you want to create on top of that existing digital material, you still can do that. But then our process is that you don't start from zero. You start something from that's existing. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you, Jolanta.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions that you guys would like to ask Wayne? Please feel free to ask us. Okay, it's all right. So thank you so much, guys, for joining us today, and we hope you found this presentation helpful. And please don't hesitate to schedule a demo, or if you want to learn more about us, just contact us. And regarding the digital product creation, you can visit our website, our social media accounts to learn more about it. And please help us to fill out our survey. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you soon. Goodbye.